Hey everybody, I'm Jeff Wall, and this is Lingo Sports, and today we are starting a brand new series. It's the top 5 fighters from countries around the world. This won't just be about what fighters accomplish in the cage or the ring in terms of their belts or great fights. It'll also be the styles that they bring into it from each of those countries and how they define them. Each country obviously has its culture that adds to it, but also, of course, there's the martial arts themselves, which each country is very different in. So today we will start things off with the top 5 fighters from England. But before we do that, please make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and of course subscribe to Lingo Sports so you don't miss any of the amazing MMA, basketball, and football content on our channel. Now let's get things started with Mr. Darren Till.
Putting him on the list so soon may seem a little bit crazy, but I personally feel Till has a lot of potential still. He also has some pretty solid wins over great competition, and up until recently he's been very consistent and not handed any easy opponents like you might think. Not only that, everyone he's lost to has been an elite fighter, which is really not that shameful in any way. Jorge Masvidal is obviously one of the best to ever do it and was on a hot streak, and Tyron Woodley is one of the best champions in UFC history. Not only that, but he's at a new weight class now, and he's beaten a former title challenger in Kelvin Gastelum with a game plan that he never employs. That alone should give the Darren Till believers some hope, even if he does lose to Robert Whittaker tonight.
The man, better known as Semtex, Paul Daley, is a veteran of 61 pro fights. And in each and every one of those fights, you know his intentions, and that is to stand and bang.
It can be easy to dislike the cocky trash talker, especially when he's KOing your favorite fighters. One thing is for sure though, Semtex really embodies British MMA as a style or an art. After all, martial arts is a form of artistry, and while he may have the obvious holes in his game, there is something to admire about a guy who almost refuses to change and apply his art the way he wants to do it. Daley embodies the main martial arts of the country, like boxing, Muay Thai, and the so-called traditional martial arts like karate and taekwondo. In that way, he represents his country like no one else.
Liam McGeary's run at the top does seem to be over by all accounts, but there's no doubt the impact he's made on his country's MMA scene.
McGeary in his prime was absolutely unbeatable in the Bellator cage. His size, power, and speed grappling game made him a nightmare for opponents. Emmanuel Newton, Tito Ortiz, and Len Vassell could do nothing to trouble McGeary. To this day, Liam McGeary is the lone British Bellator champion and the first British champion in MMA outside of their home country. Although his wrestling and get-ups have been exposed by many controlled grapplers, his time at the top was one of the best to ever come out of England.
The former Bama champ Leon Rocky Edwards has beaten just about everybody there is to beat in the UFC's 170-pound division. And on his 8-fight win streak, he is the man everyone is trying to avoid.
When it's all said and done, Leon Edwards may prove to be the best fighter from England. For now though, the Birmingham native comes in at number 3. If y'all pay any attention to my Twitter, this spot should not be much of a surprise. It has been an absolute travesty for Edwards to be passed over by Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal, no matter how good those two are. Edwards for sure is the most complete fighter to ever compete out of Britain. He's easily handled all 8 of his last opponents, including Vicente Luque, Albert Tumanov, Brian Barberena, Donald Cerrone, Gunnar Nelson, and former lightweight champion Rafael dos Anjos. Out of everyone in the 170-pound division, there may be no one that can compete with Kamaru Usman like Edwards. So if he gets his shot, you better tune in.
Nowadays, Dan Hardy is more often known for his color commentary and analyst work for the UFC. But back in the day before his heart condition, the Outlaw was one of the welterweight's best.
Some MMA technique junkies look back on Hardy and don't think much of him. But I think when looking back in time, Dan Hardy was one of the best and most technical strikers at the time in his division, which was probably the best compared to the modern day lightweights. Hardy had hair trigger counters and footwork to keep him out of danger and maximize his power. Like his teammate Paul Daly, you always knew Hardy would try to sprawl and brawl, and during his peak he had a lot more success with that than most. But for Hardy, it's also what he did before and after fights with psychological warfare, or as some might call it, shit-talking. Hardy definitely fits the bill as the quick-witted Brit, and his opponents just couldn't keep up with him, which, looking back, is so far removed from the extremely professional and eloquent analyst we know today.
The winner of the Ultimate Fighter United States versus the United Kingdom, Ross Pearson, was almost a guarantee on any UK card. And like his teammates Hardy and Daly, he was one of the pioneers for the British style.
Ross Pearson didn't reach the highest heights of the MMA world, but he was a staple of the UFC lightweight and featherweight divisions for 10 years, with 25 fights in the top flight. That is incredible success. Most fighters are lucky to even get 8 fights with the organization. That's even more impressive considering he was an action-fighting gatekeeper. Not everyone can be a champion, and few will ever even come close. But a 10-year gatekeeper to the throne is actually a really important role. He's been in wars with the best of them as well. Al Iaquinta, George Sotiropoulos, Cub Swanson, Sam Stout, Chad Laprise, and Jorge Masvidal. He also gave back as a coach of the Ultimate Fighter Smashes season. And as per our discussion on UFC 251 about Kamaru Usman being a boring fighter, Ross Pearson definitely does not fit that side of the debate, which is why he really lives up to the nickname, The Real Deal.
If I were to ask you who you would think of as the #1 fighter that comes to mind when you think of English MMA, I think one guy would come to mind, and for good reason. So let me explain why Michael Bisping takes the #1 spot.
Michael Bisping was the fighter to force the UFC to make serious investments in the UK as a whole. It's the count that paved the way for all others to come. The one that helped draw more interest in his home country and as a result, produce all the fighters mentioned on this countdown. Like Hardy and many others, Michael Bisping was never afraid to tear into his opponents. I would even say that he was a bit more cold than most. You got to see that in full force when he took home the Ultimate Fighter 3 trophy. But his trash talking has never gone away. You still even see it as he's left the cage for the booth. In the cage though, he was the model British fighter, always wanting to keep the fight on the feet, even though he never packed much of a punch. He beat fighters with his savvy and his pace. Having said that, Bisping, unlike many fighters from his home country, actually did adapt. His wrestling defense and wrestling overall really improved through his career. He could finish fighters with ground and pound, so he was not really a one-trick pony by any means. You can rarely point to anyone who has more heart and more desire to pull through the tough situations against all odds like Michael Bisping did. This guy has been knocked around and knocked out a lot, but he always rose back up. Bisping kept pushing for his dreams until the age of 39 when he took the title from Luke Rockhold, and his dreams finally came true. A truly inspirational story. Aside from durability, Michael Bisping had next to no real physical edge over any of his opponents. As his chin wore down later in his career, he really had to rely even more on his experience, his skill, and his heart. And no one can take that away from him.
Thanks everybody for tuning into this video. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Lingo Sports so you don't miss any of our MMA, football, and basketball content. And we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.